I'd like to talk with you now about a special case in factoring. Now, before I talk about it, it's called the difference of two squares. I want to go ahead and go back to a couple weeks ago, and I want to multiply this binomial by this binomial. Now, if you look at this binomial, they are identical except for the minus and the plus. And something very special happens here. So I'm going to multiply this out. 2x times 2x gives me 4x to the second. 2x times 3 gives me 6x. And then I'm going to multiply through with the second one. That gives me negative 6x. Negative 3 times 2x is negative 6x. And negative 3 times 3 is negative 9. Now what's very, very special about this is that the middle terms cancel out, and they leave us with 4x squared minus 9. This is a case, remember, this is the only case when a binomial times a binomial gives you a binomial. So, what's going on there? Wait a minute, that looks weird. There's no term with an x in the center. Now, think about that a moment. If I gave you something like that to factor, how would you recognize that there's no middle term? So take a look at 4x squared and take a look at 9. Let's look at the 9, the back part first. Could you take the square root of 9? What's the square root of 9? Square root of 9 is 3. Could you take the square root of 4x squared? You could. The square root of 4x squared, well, the square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of x squared, well, that's x, 2x. So when you see these, hopefully it's jumping out at you that, hey, it's got to be a binomial, and it's got to be identical except for the plus and the minus. And you just use the square root of both parts. Now, I didn't write any rules for this on the board. I know you're probably used to seeing me write rules. Okay, it really falls under the rules for trinomials. Okay, except you're just taking the square root of both the first and the second one. So I'm going to go on ahead and do some parentheses like we normally would. What's the square root of x squared? Well, to get an x squared, the square root of x squared is x and x. And what's the square root of 16? The square root of 16 is 4. So I'm going to write a minus and a plus. You see, no middle term means they have to be identical. You want to check it? You just multiply it out. X times x, x squared. X times 4, 4x. Negative 4 times x, negative 4x. Negative 4 times 4, negative 16. The middle terms cancel out. It's x squared minus 16. That is the correct answer. Now, these are very contrived. When you look at them, they are things that you can take the square roots of. 9x to the second. There aren't a lot of numbers you can take a square root of. You take a square root of 9? Absolutely. 9x to the second would be, when you take the square root of the first and the second one, it's 3x. Now I've got some people that'll sit there and they'll say, 1/4, no, it's a fraction. Horrible fractions. It's okay. The square root of fractions is easy. To do the square root of 1/4, you do the square root of the top, and you do the square root of the bottom. It's 1/2. The square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2. And don't forget to put in your plus and your minus. Now some people may be looking really hard at this, and they'll say, Mr. Trapp, you wrote a minus and a plus up here, and now you wrote a plus and a minus down here. What's going on with that? It's okay. You can have a plus and a minus and the plus. Remember, the order doesn't matter when you're multiplying binomials. You'll get the same answer. All right, one more. 25x squared minus 1. All right. This one tends to freak students out a little bit. 25x squared, they all tend to get. The square root of 25x squared is 5x. But there's a 1 there. What do I do with the 1? The same thing you did with the 1/4, the same thing you did with the 16. You take the square root of it. The square root of 1 is 1. And you write a plus and a minus, or a minus and a plus, whatever floats your boat. Anyway, when you're doing these, this is a special case. It's the difference of two squares. Two squares. Both numbers you have to be able to take the square root of. If I give you something like x squared minus 12, can you factor x squared minus 12? Not nicely. X squared is a square, but 12 is not. At this point, you can't factor that. If you go a lot further in mathematics, they'll have you factoring that. But right now, we don't have you doing it. Anyway, take your time on these problems and good luck.